Namaskar, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha. In Perspective today, we will talk about the political and economic turmoil in our neighboring country, Pakistan. Well, Pakistan's National Assembly will convene on Friday, the 25th of March, to take up a no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Imran Khan. Around 100 lawmakers from the Pakistan Muslim League-Nawaz and Pakistan People's Party submitted the no-confidence motion earlier this month, alleging that the PTI government, led by Imran Khan, was responsible for the economic crisis and the spiraling inflation in the country. Now, under the Constitution, the Speaker of the lower house of Parliament is required to convene the session within 14 days of receiving the motion, a deadline which fell on Monday. However, the date was pushed back several days because of a conference of the Islamic countries in Islamabad scheduled to take place on the 23rd of March. Once the motion is formally taken up by the House, the voting should be held between 3 to 7 days. Now, in the 342-member National Assembly, the opposition needs 172 votes to remove Imran Khan, whose party has 155 members in the House and needs at least 172 lawmakers on its side to remain in the government. The party has the support of 23 members belonging to at least 6 political parties. However, the bigger worry for Imran Khan at the moment is that the opposition now includes also members of his own party. So already reeling under a massive economic crisis, the country is now engulfed in a political turmoil as well. What will be the impact and implications on the country's political and economic landscape is what we will try and understand on the program today. And for this, joining us are 3 very distinguished panelists. Let me first introduce them to you. With me in the studio is Major General retired Dhruv C. Katoch, Director of the India Foundation. Welcome to Sansad TV, Major General. And joining us virtually on the program is Mr. T.C. Raghavan, former High Commissioner of India to Pakistan, and Mr. Tariq Fateh, he's an author. Welcome, gentlemen, to Sansad TV. Mr. Raghavan, before we begin talking about the economic and political upheaval in Pakistan, there's been a very interesting, very unlikely statement coming in from the Pakistan Prime Minister, the embattled Prime Minister, I should say, about India's independent foreign policy. So let me first get in a remark from you on that statement. What do you make of the statement? Not that other countries, other leaders have not appreciated India's foreign policy, but coming from a fierce, staunch critic of the ruling NDA government, this is very, very unlikely, of course, has grabbed a lot of headlines. What do you make of his statement, sir?
Well, I don't think we should make too much of any of Prime Minister Imran Khan's statement, likely or unlikely. I think what he said has to be taken in terms of a domestic context. And while it may have sounded like a compliment to the way India has conducted its affairs, what he was saying was, in effect, that only I am capable in Pakistan of conducting an independent foreign policy, and all those who are opposed to me are subservient to external powers. In the past, he has blamed his opponents for being subservient to the United States, to the Western Alliance in general, or indeed to India too. So I think we should, although the remark has received a fair amount of play in our media, yes, I don't think we should make too much out of it.
Okay. Major General, what do you make of the statement? Do you also agree with Mr. Raghavan that he is playing to the gallery? Of course, he's fallen out with the Pakistani army. Who is he now playing to? What is the last hope that he's clinging to?
Well, Tina, you know, when I heard that statement, I think the first impression which came to me that he's embattled and he's about to go. And whenever these Pakistani, the prime ministers, when they are about to go, they start making statements of this nature. I think I'll agree. I totally agree with the ambassador. He is embattled. And now he's trying to tell them, listen, if India can have an independent foreign policy, we can also have an independent foreign policy. And I will give it to you. But I really don't think he's in a position to give an independent foreign policy. He has succumbed to every single statement which he has made. And I just want to give one example pertaining to the economy. When he took over as the Prime Minister, he said, I will never go to any country with a begging bowl. And now you see him going with a begging bowl to Saudi Arabia, to the Emirates, and to China, and to the IMF. So he is embattled, and I think he will be the Prime Minister up to Friday or whenever the vote is held. He doesn't have any time beyond that.
You don't think he's going to create history by surviving the full term?
I don't think he'll survive.
Mr. Fateh, so what is your point of view? Just 3.5 years ago, this very man was supposedly the chosen one of the Pakistani army, the one who could wrest power from Nawaz Sharif. Now, at the verge of being ousted, of becoming the first prime minister to actually be removed through a no-confidence motion. What do you think brought Imran Khan to this situation? What went wrong with him?
Nothing went wrong. You need to understand that the greatest venture and latest venture of the Pakistan military is that they've started manufacturing green peas, frozen green peas. So when there's a country who's military and who's nuclear powered, but takes fancy in making Quaker oats and breakfast cereals or banaspati ghee, it shows you the desperation of how the country is run economically. And the latest figures of military generals and senior politicians with bank accounts in Credit Suisse in Switzerland. Pakistan is a pot full of money with no one to guard it, and anybody who comes to power is primarily there to scoop up as much wealth as possible and then get the hell out of that country. I mean, those of us who follow Pakistan politics from the 50s know how speakers used to get kidnapped. The Governor General would dissolve the parliament and eradicate the constitution. Pakistan is not a country. Pakistan is simply an experiment of what a remnant of the Cold War, and sooner or later it's going to dither away. They should thank India for not intervening or understanding the inherent weakness of the Pakistan establishment, its military, its federation. Sindh should have been, Sindh is in the Indian national anthem, it should have been free by now. Balochistan is having a war of liberation now since 1948. And in the frontier region, of which is now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Durand line is in question, and they are fighting the very Taliban that they created. So there is, it's not that there are some there's a brain trust that decides, what is going to be the strategy. They get there to loot the exchequer of the country and get out of it before it's too late. And you will notice how many of them end up in the United States. Pakistan's military still has those connections that were there established when SEATO and CENTO were equivalent to NATO, and Pakistan, Iran and Turkey were fixed in that military alliance. So this is not a country that is governed by its parliament or its generals. It is governed by people who trade with it and who have financial interests in it, or would like to make a killing on the cotton market or the wheat that it exports. This is a prime minister who went to Moscow and said, I'm excited at the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I've met this man. I've known him since 1970 when he was the mere cricket captain. Salman Rushdie called him the dim. He's not there. He's really not there. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but there is nothing in his mind. He's on his now looking for his fourth wife. You have to be really a non-politician or a non-thinker. Your primary focus would be on how many women you can have in your chamber. That's what it has become. His second wife has written some pretty revealing things about who he keeps company with. So this is not a man who has any vision. He has never read history. He talks about creating an Islamic society like that of Medina, without knowing what time period he's talking about.
Certainly. So let me take this very interesting point to Ambassador Raghavan. But 3.5 years ago, Ambassador, this very man was portrayed as the one who would give Pakistan a stable government against a corrupt government led by Nawaz Sharif. He was the chosen one, as I said earlier as well, of the Pakistani army. In just 3.5 years, is it just the economic crisis that Imran Khan has not been able to handle, or there is more to the upheaval that the country is now witnessing?
Well, there are numerous acts of omission and commission of Prime Minister Imran Khan, but there are also structural factors at play. I think one should remember that Prime Minister Imran Khan will by no means be the first Pakistani Prime Minister not to complete a full term. In fact, in Pakistan's history, no Prime Minister has ever completed a term.
Yes.
And usually terms have got terminated midway or a little less than midway because of the civil-military tussle which emerges. In Prime Minister Imran Khan's case, it is not so much a civil-military tussle, but rather inability to manage the politics around his government, and in the process developing differences with the military. So in a sense, civil-military aspect also comes in. So there is a structural factor of instability in Pakistan's politics, and it has a great deal to do with as to how the polity is structured and the inability of the political class and the military establishment to come to reasonable power sharing arrangements which are durable. So that is why you have someone who is the military's favorite, chosen favorite 3.5 years ago, now possibly having to make his way out. But earlier prime ministers too, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, for instance, who became such a major contesting point for the military, also had emerged as a chosen favorite in the past. So had Zulfikar Ali Bhutto of the People's Party. The fact is, this is a structural factor about how the political class and the military are unable to manage their interface, and which is why the country periodically slips into a political crisis. The economic factors have certainly played a role, because economic mismanagement in the last 2 or 3 years and the enormous inflation and the various other economic issues which have plagued Pakistan have also played a role in making Imran Khan personally unpopular and his government deeply unpopular. And the military wanted also to distance itself from the unpopularity which surrounds the government currently.
Absolutely, and that explains the army's neutral stand, Major General. But what Ambassador Raghavan says, history could be repeating itself in the sense that Imran Khan could be going the same way that his predecessors have gone by not completing the 5-year term. But how are the numbers stacked up against him if he goes through the no confidence motion? Or do you think before that, once the conference of the Islamic countries is over, will he be forced to resign? What is your guess?
Very frankly, I think he will have to go through the no confidence motion. That means they will have to assemble all the legislators. They will have to come in and actually put in their vote. Now, if he sees the writing on the wall, he may put in his papers before that, because under any mathematics, he is not going to get those numbers. When his own party is against him, and when the opposition is very well united.
Absolutely, and several dissident members.
Yes. And you see, there is a difference between the way he is being removed and the way the other prime ministers were removed. If you look at Nawaz Sharif and the Bhuttos, they were actually becoming very powerful, and at some point of time, the military thought that they are trying to usurp the military's power. That is the time when the military said no. In Imran Khan's case, I think he is being removed for sheer incompetence. There is a fundamental difference there. This man is incompetent, and he didn't know how to do it. Ultimately, there were 3 things which I thought, which Pakistan required. The 3 strategic decisions which they had to take to sort the economy out. Because once the economy goes, everything else goes. The first of these was their relationship with India. You see, and in the security paper which they took out, they made it very clear they will concentrate on geo-economics rather than geopolitics. They have not done that. The second thing is using terrorism as an instrument of foreign policy. I see no change in that. So if you aren't willing to change these two fundamental aspects, then nothing else will change. And the third reason, which nobody really talks about, but which in my view is a very important reason, is population. You see, when you look at 1971, or even when you go back to 1947, when the country got independence and the two countries were formed, the population of Bangladesh was more than the population of Pakistan. Today, the population of Pakistan is 23 to 24 crores, whereas the population of Bangladesh is 18 crores. Because of this excessive population and no attempt to control it, Pakistan, which used to be a food exporting country, is now a net importer of food. And there is nobody is even thinking of that. So I really don't see any hope of this country, because these are the basic strategic and structural weaknesses, which if you don't address this, I'm afraid nothing else is going to change.
Mr. Fateh, so sheer incompetence is one key factor which is emerging as the reason that, Mr. Imran Khan is in a situation that he is in. But the dire state of economy in Pakistan has been the talk of the country, not just in recent months, but I think Imran Khan even inherited a government which was in economic turbulence. So what, according to you, would explain the reasons for his falling out of the Pakistani military?
There's one thing we are missing out on this, that over the course of the last, say, 50 years, Pakistan has become increasingly a country in which religion is the main factor in how people judge each other. I left that country in 1978. I can't remember a time, I had not heard the word hijab till 1978. I'm just giving you an example of how 100 million people or 250 million people are focused exclusively on the notion of religiosity and their destiny as people who will destroy, what we call Ghazwa-e-Hind, the destruction of Hinduism and India as their destiny. They live with it, and it's not a joke. You sit with them, you talk with educated Pakistanis who in the West live in North America, and it takes you a minute or two to figure out that the person is thinking on the same lines, on the same level as the guy who was with Lashkar-e-Taiba. You could have done your PhD, and yet you are based. No one concerns themselves about the economy of that country at all. Every civil servant has a foreign bank account in Switzerland or overseas. The first thing they want to do is to get rid of their Pakistani citizenship and become European or American, or almost every consul general that I've known in Toronto has settled down and become a Canadian. So the people running the ship know it's over. There's a reason why Imran Khan's children never live in Pakistan. And yet he has the audacity to tell Bilawal Bhutto that you can't speak the language of the country. His kids have no idea what is Pakistan. And so the middle class that essentially forms the backbone of any developing nation is devoid of any connection other than corruption and wealth creation, or supporting terror groups, and thinking of it as religious duty. It's a completely different country than what it was when the British asked Mr. Jinnah to cut India in two. And people have not read their history. You meet any university student, he wouldn't know 90% of what has happened in this country. People begin, I've met educated Pakistanis who think life began with General Ziaul Haq and Mr. Bhutto. If you ask them anything about the 50s or about Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan, or where he came from, or who Mr. Jinnah was, where did he get elected, you will find no one has a clue about that. They are simply there, the middle classes or the upper middle classes, to loot the exchequer of the country and figure out ways to transfer that wealth into Swiss bank accounts. You would find absolutely no one of the caliber of, say, Ghaffar Khan in Pakistan, or Mr. Bizinjo, who was governor of Balochistan, or Sheikh Mujib, who should have been Prime Minister of Pakistan. There is nothing there. There is no political talk. Sometimes when I hear the language in Parliament or the abuses that are heard on the street or the vulgarity of the language, it stuns me. In its worst, I never would have thought that it would come to this, that you would have, four-letter words being thrown at each other inside Parliament, and the Speaker has no control over it. Until Pakistan breaks into its federally administered parts, their role is only one: to bleed Afghanistan and India. And that can't continue. You cannot have a country whose sole base is hatred of the other. And the more you hate, the more you get popular.
Extremely sad state of affairs, Ambassador, as Mr. Fateh has been pointing out. So lots of historical factors, of course, responsible for the state of affairs in Pakistan at the moment. But very, very unfortunate for the leader who promised a Naya Pakistan. Now the very leader is facing an uncertain future himself. But a few days ago, you wrote an article, Ambassador, about how the plot is thickening in Pakistan. What now, looking at the situation, and with 25th of March, just about a couple of days left to go, what do you think is going to be the climax of this plot?
Well, if one had to take a call right now, it would appear that it is going to be curtains for Prime Minister Imran Khan. One doesn't know what kind of architecture will emerge after him, but it does appear that he has come to the end of the road. But we are talking about Pakistan, and things can change. One possibility, which I personally don't give too much weightage to, but nevertheless, it is receiving a certain amount of, has a certain amount of weight, is that something may be cooked up during the OIC foreign ministers meeting, which you referred to earlier, that some kind of a patchwork arrangement which saves everyone's face may be cooked up or maybe patched up. One doesn't know. I think things have gone too far for an agreement to be somehow put together at this late stage. But I will say two general points. Yes, the historical factors and the structural factors in Pakistan are certainly very important. And Pakistan is a standing lesson to every pluralistic country of how not to get things wrong. If you're in a multi-religious society, don't introduce too much religion into public life. This is the standard lesson which anyone can derive from Pakistan.
Absolutely.
The second factor is also somewhat related, that while it is true that Pakistan is bedevilled by all these numerous issues, especially federal issues and regional issues, but it is also a fact that in the last 70-odd years, notwithstanding the enormous drawbacks of their system, a sense of Pakistani nationalism has also emerged in Pakistan, and it cuts across certainly all regional identities. So I don't think we are going to be in a situation in the near future that somehow Pakistan is going to wither away and disappear because of sheer incompetence, because of corruption, because of strategic errors of judgment with regard to Afghanistan and India. No, Pakistan is going to remain as a neighbor of ours for a long time, and we have to deal with it as such.
Absolutely, and that's why we are very, very closely monitoring the situation in Pakistan, what are the developments that are taking place over the last few weeks, Major General. But one thing that looks certain is Imran Khan seems to be on his way out. What is your guess? What could happen after that? Will the country hold fresh elections, or will the army choose an interim prime minister and hold elections maybe in the coming years, maybe 2023-24?
Very frankly, I think that's an open bet now, which way the army takes it, because ultimately it is the army which will decide, regardless of the fact that they call themselves a democracy. So, or alternatively, if let us say the other parties like either Bhutto's party or Nawaz Sharif's party, if they can cobble up a majority, perhaps by cooperating with each other, I really don't know. That's, of course, again, a very, very difficult bet. So for anybody now to cobble up a majority is not going to be easy. Elections perhaps may be the right way out, and they will have an interim government in between. Imran Khan has done this 3.5 years, and I would, if I have to give a bet on it, I would really go for fresh elections.
And just in case if the opposition is not as united after Imran Khan is gone, could there be a comeback of the military power in Pakistan?
Very frankly, I don't think the military is going to get in. They are far too smart. They are smarter than the politicians. They are not going to get embroiled in this. So they're in a very happy situation, you see. As Mr. Tariq Fateh has said, where is the money? The military's got the money. Where are they investing it? In the United States and Europe. Oh, the gravy train they have got. They aren't really concerned. When the Pakistani budget is prepared every year, the military first tells them this is the army budget. After that, they say you can do what you want. It is not something which I am saying. It is something which the Pakistanis have stated. So I don't see any change in that. It's the military is not going to get involved, because if they get involved in the administration, then they are accountable. In this case, you will have a civilian prime minister who is accountable, whomsoever it is. And well, if he doesn't perform, they can remove him the way they have removed the others.
Okay, so let's see how it goes in the coming few days. But Mr. Fateh, one concluding remark from you. Of course, the present looks very, very grim. How do you look at the future of Pakistan?
I'd like to differ with what the ambassador said. Pakistan is a seriously divided country. There is no common Pakistanism. Anyone in Balochistan, the word Pakistani means Punjabi. In Sindh, it means Punjabi. The Urdu-speaking mafia that came all the way from UP and Bihar and erased the culture of Sindh and the Gujarati that was spoken there. There's a huge divide. Today, Karachi is a Pashtun majority-speaking city with no representation in parliament, because Pashtuns are considered to be sort of, unworthy of being sensible. This entire imposition of Urdu on Pakistan made sure that that country will not survive. I am sometimes surprised why our Indian friends do not understand that. I mean, suppose Bangla was imposed on Delhi as its national language, or 5% of Pakistanis spoke Urdu, and it's the national language. You think the Pashtuns will accept that? Or the Baloch, who got their independence on August 11th, straight from the British, it wasn't a princely state, and got invaded in March 1948. There was a Balochistan embassy in Karachi when Karachi was the capital.
Fateh, you have a point, because a divided society, of course, is not healthy for any country. And Pakistan is a classic example of what we are witnessing. The state of affairs in Pakistan currently, economic turmoil is something that they had to focus on. And now, of course, they are faced with this political upheaval. So how things unfold in our neighboring country is something that, of course, we will keep an eye on. And India will be looking at how what happens politically and economically in our neighboring country in the next few days. But for the moment, I'll have to wind up the discussion. It's been wonderful to have all three of you on the program, joining us on Sansad TV, sparing your time and sharing this wonderful insight with us and our viewers. It was a pleasure having you on the show. So thank you very much to all three of you, Major General, for joining us in the studio today. It's been a pleasure interacting with you. So that's it from us on this edition of Perspective Today. Thanks very much to all our viewers as well for their valuable time.